Iryna Zarutska, that poor Ukrainian girl on the subway who lost her life to senseless violence. The Democrat Party wants you to forget about her, but we're not going to. I'm going to go more into details on her story right here on this episode of American Advocate, plus major developments from the FBI and director of the FBI, Kash Patel. They've been taking incredible steps towards transparency and justice overall. I'll cover a bunch of different stories hitting the airwaves when it comes to them. And then finally, James Comey indicted. I've been waiting to report on this for a day or two because I wanted to see a little bit more details before I did. And I've got some behind the scenes stories that I think you'll find interesting, as well as, of course, my own thoughts and opinions on how all of this will go with him. All of that and maybe a little more right here, right now on American Advocates. Iryna Zarutska. This was a horrendous scenario to watch unfold, and sadly, it unfolded and went about a week or two without the security footage even being released or made public at all because, of course, I believe it was North Carolina, they wanted to cover this up. It finally went public. Everyone was outraged about it, including Charlie Kirk himself. It was the final post that he made on X, if memory serves correctly, before he himself was assassinated. And of course, when that happened, I had a video made about this poor woman who was murdered on the subway train. I was set to release it. Charlie Kirk was assassinated, and that just took over my own thoughts, let alone everything else going on in the media for the next 2 weeks. And we're never going to forget Charlie, and we're going to continue to honor his legacy and continue to talk about him. I'm sure more developments will happen, but we cannot forget this. And the Democrats, trust me, they want you to forget her. Iryna's law. The North Carolina House GOP and North Carolina Senate have passed this law, and now we're just waiting on the governor of North Carolina, and we'll cover him in a second. But Iryna's law, this is what's being set up in honor of her now over this. Bail and pretrial release. Violent offenses must go before a judge within 48 hours instead of a magistrate. We're going to cover why that's important in a second as well. Limits quick release for serious crimes. Tougher pretrial standards. The magistrate oversight. The Chief Justice gains the power to suspend magistrates. Again, I'm going to tell you why that's important. Because magistrates must record factual findings on bail decisions. Failure could trigger a removal. Also in Iryna's law. The death penalty resumption. Streamlines capital appeals. Imposes strict deadlines. These death penalty cases, capital punishment cases that go on for far too long. Requires lethal injection. Permits backup methods. Mental health and safety, expands grounds for involuntary commitment. District attorneys get a formal role in hearings, and also orders a study on the link between mental health and public safety. Now, when it comes to the topic of the magistrate, let's cover that first. Teresa A. Stokes, the magistrate who was responsible for releasing the violent man back out into the streets who wound up taking Iryna Zarutska's life for literally no reason. We've learned, the internet that is, a lot about this woman. First and foremost, I want to say one of the most shocking things that I've learned is that this magistrate doesn't have a law degree to our knowledge, and to our knowledge has not passed a bar exam. So she's not a lawyer, she has no law history, none of that. She was appointed by another judge, from what I've read. And there she is serving, with no real actual education on the matter, or no prior history of experience. And so this, of course, made people naturally very outraged. Now, some more information has come out about her. Despite the fact that she is serving as a magistrate in North Carolina, it appears that she runs this Second Chance Services, which of course states, we are a mental health and addiction clinic in Charlotte, North Carolina, offering peer support services, therapy, substance abuse treatment, dual diagnosis care, telehealth services, and court-ordered evaluations. And so now, of course, the theory is developing. Is Teresa Stokes light on crime and quick to release criminals because perhaps Second Chance Services benefits when she does? Perhaps she could leverage the power of the courts to order people into her clinic that she runs and profit off of it? We can't be sure of that just yet, but many people are calling for investigations into this matter. And on top of that, again, going back to Iryna's law that we're trying to get passed here, violent offenses must go before a judge within 48 hours instead of a magistrate. That seems to make a lot more sense now, doesn't it? The Chief Justice gains power to suspend magistrates. Magistrates must record factual findings on bail decisions. Rather than just giving this bail, these Democrat policies are what are harming society, and that's why they want you to forget about Iryna. And that leads me, of course, to the governor now of North Carolina, Josh Stein. He seems to be the holdup here when it comes to Iryna's law, and he was asked outright on CNN just the other day about what the deal is with Iryna's law and what his thoughts are on it. Take a listen.
Earlier this week in North Carolina, the state legislature passed Iryna's law, a criminal justice package named for the Ukrainian refugee who was murdered on Charlotte's light rail system last month. The bill would limit bail, ensure more defendants undergo mental health evaluations, and notably could help restart executions. The bill is on your desk, Governor. Will you sign it?
Well, I'm reviewing it as we speak. It's a complicated bill, but here's the thing. That young woman was a light. I've met with her family. She was a special person. She was friendly to everyone she came into contact with. She loved animals. She loved art. She was hardworking. She was really making a life here. She came 3 years ago from war-torn Ukraine, trying to come to a peaceful place where she could have that brighter future. And she was really happy here. Her death is an absolute travesty, horrific. What we need to do is make sure that in response, we are going to take measures to keep our community safer.
I'm not going to just keep playing the video, but I can summarize the last part of it there as well as the whole video for you. He doesn't directly answer the question about passing Iryna's law. Probably because, in truth, he's opposed to it, just like all Democrats are opposed to it. You can see right here, too. These are some statistics from the page on Twitter called, well, X, National Conservative. In the North Carolina Senate, 77.8% of 36 whites, non-Jewish, voted yes on Iryna's law. 0% of the 10 black people voted yes. There are 2 outspokenly Jewish members, an Arab, and I don't even know how to say that word, but a person from India. 0% of all of those voted yes either. Overall, the vote was 56% yes, 16% no, and 28% not voting. Now, of course, this is Governor Josh Stein's official X page where he does state on September 8th, I am heartbroken for the family of Iryna Zarutska, who lost their loved one to this senseless act of violence, and I am appalled by the footage of her murder. We need more cops on the beat to keep people safe. That's why my budget calls for more funding to hire more well-trained police officers. I call upon the legislator to pass my law enforcement recruitment and retention package to address vacancies in our state and local agencies so they can stop these horrific crimes and hold violent criminals accountable. All right, not a terrible tweet. It's also the only tweet, because you can see here, I have in the search bar under his page, Iryna Zarutska. I want to see how many times this guy has talked about this. And you scroll down, and it just goes immediately to June 24th, 2020. He couldn't have been talking about Iryna there. April 22nd of this year, once again, couldn't have. And so this is the only tweet that I can find him actually even talking about Iryna Zarutska. But how many times did he talk about the death of George Floyd? You can see here, this was one of his tweets. My heart aches for the family of George Floyd. And he says, my heart aches for the family of George Floyd. His death was so senseless and wrong. The actions of the officer so heartless and cruel. Like so many of you, I have experienced a range of emotions from outrage to anger to profound sadness to resolve. So we can stop this from happening in our country. We must recruit public-spirited people into law enforcement, train them to de-escalate situations, monitor their performance, and hold them accountable for their actions. I thank the North Carolina Sheriff's Association for its statement on Mr. Floyd's death, describing the law enforcement conduct as unprofessional, egregious, and inexcusable. The sheriffs declare that this conduct cannot be tolerated and must be swiftly addressed by the law enforcement community and criminal justice system. I wholeheartedly agree. Our nation suffers from a legacy of racism that over generations has become institutionalized in our healthcare system, our economy, our education system, and our criminal justice system. Each one of us must do our part to confront this stain, and that obviously includes law enforcement. Justice requires it. This had me curious, of course, because this was posted by the Libs of TikTok page, and so I wanted to know, in comparison to the one tweet that Josh Stein put out for Iryna Zarutska's death, how many tweets has he put out about George Floyd in the past? And so you can see right at the top of the search bar, searching the @North Carolina Governor official page for Josh Stein, searching the term George Floyd, you can see he tweeted about it here. He tweeted about George Floyd here. He tweeted about George Floyd here. He tweeted about it here. You can see he tweeted about it here, 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 here. I've already lost count. How many? Is that 7, 8? I'd say 7 or 8, right? And so what we're looking at is like a 7 to 8 to 1 ratio by this guy on how much he cares in comparison to Iryna Zarutska. Now, mind you, George Floyd, we already know from an autopsy result, died of an overdose. That is scientific and medical fact, according to the autopsy report. But the outrage publicly over George Floyd's death was there, even by their own governor, compared to, once again, this poor Ukrainian girl, who, by the way, when she was done up with makeup and everything, when you can see what she looked like, she had a lot of possibilities going for her. And she chose to come here in America rather than do OnlyFans. She decided to work for a pizza parlor and hold an honest job, and she was murdered for it on her way home after a long day of work. Senselessly. On camera, senselessly. Does Governor Josh Stein care that much, though? I don't think so. Not from what I'm seeing in comparison. He seems to have cared a lot more about George Floyd than he cares about Iryna Zarutska. When it comes to the problem here, systemically, it's Democrat in North Carolina, and this summarizes it perfectly. Top left there, you have Governor Josh Stein, who will not sign Iryna's law and dodges the question about signing it. Right on CNN, won't answer it. Dodges around it. Tells us how wonderful of a person Iryna was and how much her family cares about her. That's his answer to the question. To the right there, you have a Democrat judge, Roy Wiggins, I think his name is. He refuses to fire the Democrat magistrate on the bottom left there, Teresa Stokes. And then there's Teresa Stokes. And she won't stop freeing the criminals, releasing them on bail. Violent murderers. Violent people. I mean, the guy who murdered Iryna Zarutska was a known schizophrenic with incredible mental health issues, and his own mother actually pleaded with the courts to keep him locked up, and they wouldn't. The magistrate decided, no, we'll put him out on the streets anyway. She's all about freeing people. Criminals. And there you have Iryna Zarutska, bottom right, and she paid for all of this. Democrat policies with her own life. The message needs to be clear. We have not forgotten about this girl, and we demand justice for her, and we demand policy change for her. And we demand the kind of policy change that not only needs to take effect in North Carolina because of this, but it needs to be adopted by every other large city in America. All of these large blue cities full of crime like this. Something needs to be done, and it is definitely Democrat policies, soft on crime policies, that are causing tragedies like Iryna Zarutska's death to occur in the streets. It has to come to an end. And we need to apply pressure to these politicians to create the change that needs to happen. Because if it's left to just Josh Stein, and if this can float under the radar long enough, I have a feeling he's not too anxious to sign Iryna's law into effect. It's truly a disgrace. Now in other news, Kash Patel making massive waves when it comes to the FBI. 3 major FBI events happening just the past couple of days alone. You can see this quote specifically released by him. Everyone, especially those in positions of power, will be held to account no matter their perch. No one is above the law. Now, he was specifically citing James Comey's indictment there, and I'm going to cover that a little bit later on this episode. But what I want to get to first is this moment right here. Do you remember this moment when the FBI agents bended the knee during the BLM George Floyd riots? Do you remember this? It was disgraceful. Law enforcement giving up their position of power. Law enforcement is supposed to come in with confidence, and they're supposed to come in and reek of authority. And that alone is supposed to stop people from following their urge to commit crimes and riots and violence. Instead, these woke FBI agents bended the knee while wearing face diapers. And of course, the liberals were fawning all over it. Meanwhile, the rest of us conservatives, this made me want to barf when this happened. But we have some excellent news. This didn't float under the radar forever. Kash Patel certainly remembered it. And every single FBI agent in this photo who bent their knee at the George Floyd riots has now been fired by Kash Patel. Now, of course, there's one exception, because as far as we can tell, this specific FBI agent may have just been bending down temporarily to pick up the half a dozen of donuts she dropped on the ground. So she actually might have to be rehired, but the rest of them have been fired for good. And it warms my heart to see that. But in more serious breaking news, this is a huge story. The FBI now confirmed to have had 275 plainclothes agents embedded in the January 6th crowds, congressional source says. And that report, now confirmed to be true, goes against everything we were told by the former FBI Director Christopher Wray, who insisted that he had no knowledge of any FBI agents being in that January 6th crowd. The director of the FBI, the former one, had no knowledge of FBI agents being in that crowd. He doesn't know. He didn't think there were any. And if there were, he certainly didn't know about it, which doesn't make sense as the director of the FBI. Here's footage of him lying about that, and now looking back on it, it's clear he perjured himself and very likely could face the same indictments that James Comey's currently facing for it.
I thought I heard you say you didn't know whether there were FBI agents or informants or human sources in the Capitol or in the vicinity on January 6th. Did I misunderstand you? I thought that's what you said.
Well, I referred very specifically to undercover agents.
Yeah. And so are you acknowledging then there were undercover agents?
As I sit here right now, I do not believe there were undercover agents.
Now, for years, people like former FBI Director Christopher Wray and former Attorney General Merrick Garland adamantly denied, or at the very least danced around, the questions of whether or not there were FBI agents in the January 6th crowd. Some of them, like Wray there, outright were denying it. And now, of course, they're trying to play the loophole in the semantics game. Well, I was referring to undercover ones. Well, they were plain clothed. What else were they if they weren't undercover? They knew what the questions were, and they had the knowledge of it back then. But people who were calling it out back then were labeled as conspiracy theorists. And you see, there are two types of conspiracy theorists out there. There are the ones that just look at circumstances with critical thinking ability, who are almost predominantly all on the right side of the aisle. And then there are morons out there who use only their emotions and feelings, who say stuff like Elon Musk stole the election for Trump, who are on the left side of the aisle. Now, of course, here's Representative Thomas Massie, who I'm not a fan of. I got to say that I can't stand him, but he is a Republican out of Kentucky, and he is now grilling Merrick Garland on this incident.
It's our constitutional duty to do oversight. Now, in that video, that was your answer to a question to me 2 years ago. When I said how many agents or assets of the government were present on January 5th and January 6th and agitating in the crowd to go into the Capitol and how many went into the Capitol. Can you answer that now?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Oh, last time, you don't know how many there were or there were none?
I don't know the answer to either of those questions. If there were any, I don't know how many. I don't know whether there are any.
I think you may have just perjured yourself that you don't know that there were any. You want to say that again, that you don't know that there were
I have
any?
no personal knowledge of this matter. I think what I said the last time.
You've had 2 years to find out. And the day, by the way, that was in reference to Ray Epps. And yesterday you indicted him. Isn't that a wonderful coincidence? On a misdemeanor. Meanwhile, you're sending grandmas to prison. You're putting people away for 20 years for merely filming. Some people weren't even there, yet you've got the guy on video who's saying go into the Capitol. He's directing people to the Capitol before the speech ends. He's at the site of the first breach. You've got all the goods on him, 10 videos, and it's an indictment for a misdemeanor? The American public isn't buying it. The charge is a joke. I yield to the chairman.
It absolutely is a joke. All of it's a joke when it comes to the Democrats and all of the loopholes and lies that they're comfortable telling while carrying out their insidious plans. It's absolutely despicable. And the worst part is, you can go on X and look up all this history, years and years now of history, literally, some of it dating back 2, 3, 4 years when it comes to this stuff. People who were right were labeled as the whack jobs of society. All the while, given enough time, as usual when it comes to the Democrats, logic and time defeat all their narratives, and we're seeing that play out once again. And this is not a channel for conspiracy theories. I've never actually been big on conspiracy theories. For instance, the Charlie Kirk assassination is somehow being spun into a conspiracy theory, which I think is absolutely nonsense. I am not that channel. I think not everything's a conspiracy theory, and not everything is worth thinking too hard about, to be honest with you. Sometimes evil just acts, and sometimes it's just as simple as that. But when it comes to this, the January 6th riots, This is like one of their main tools that they use against the conservative party, even to this day. The death of Charlie Kirk and the assassin and liberal violence being on the rise, they throw this back in all of the conservatives' faces. But the more you research into January 6th, the more you get a weird feeling in the pit of your stomach about it. And now with evidence of 275 plainclothed FBI agents being there on Capitol Hill for this, while the Democrats were taking control of the government once again because Biden had been elected, it's not sitting well with me. And so all of that shady footage that we've seen that took place that day, keep that in mind while I'm showing you some of these clips. Like, for instance, this one here, where the one Capitol Police officer was waving people to come in. This clip went viral years ago now. Everyone knows about it. No one really has a great answer for it. 275 plainclothed FBI agents. Could that be the answer to this clip? And the other ones I'll show you? Take a look. I don't know what to say, you know? I don't want to assume anything as of yet for the sake of accuracy, but that clip, I'll let the clip do the talking. That clip speaks for itself, and so does this one here. This is a lesser known one, I think, compared to that one of the police officer waving people in. What's going on here is a question everyone's always wondered. This guy was seemingly arrested by the Capitol Hill police, but then brought into some back corridor and released, and then fist bumped. For everything they want to say about how dangerous that day was and how much of a disgrace it was to our country and our democracy, some of these clips, it just makes you think twice about that. It makes you look at it from a different angle. I mean, what was this? A fist bump right there. I have it paused right at that moment. A fist bump with the arresting officers and then just allowed to walk away. Why? Why do you think that is? And again, I'll just say it. I'll say it without pointing to it and saying it's exactly why, because I don't know. I don't know for sure, but 275 plainclothed FBI agents. Originally, they tried to say there were none. And then the reports came out years ago while the Democrats were in office. Well, there might have been like 20 to 26 of them. And that alone was an eyebrow raiser. Now, 275? I can imagine a scenario like this unfolding because, you know, this guy does something like breaks a window or something and goes in and leads a bunch of people in and he gets arrested for it. And then as they're marching away, maybe he just says something like, you know who I am? And then they verify and then they go, oh, our bad, bro. And then they release them and they fist bump each other, I can imagine that. I don't know if that's true, but I could imagine that. And I'm sure you could too. This is a report that I found incredibly fascinating right here of exactly what I was imagining, actually, funny enough. So take a look at this, see what's going on here, and then decide for yourself. 275 FBI agents in plain clothing on that day, January 6th, what they had to do with it. If anything at all, maybe they were just there to be bystanders. Maybe they were just there for crowd control instead of what the conspiracy theorists would tell you, that they were there to incite stuff. Maybe they were there, honestly, just crowd control, sneaking suspicion that a riot would break out. If you take the absent-minded mainstream narrative approach to this, they were just there to make sure things didn't get out of hand. And then despite the fact that there were 275 of them there, if they were there for that purpose of crowd control, they certainly did a lousy job of it. But maybe that's all that the reason was. Maybe there's nothing deeper to this.
Do not go in there.
A radio journalist from Michigan was shooting video that day at the Capitol. What he captured were two most charitably called suspicious actors, but they are dressed in such a way that led him to believe that they were government agents. And one of them, after the windows had been broken by a protester, it was encouraging people to pull the rest of the glass out and go inside. Bobby Powell, who was the journalist that had shot it, and he has his camera rolling, he told him that would be illegal. and that wouldn't be a good idea. He warned people off not to go into that window. And then he turned his camera around and he caught this agent or suspicious actor pulling a large pane of glass out, this tempered glass. It kind of folds into itself, crunch onto the ground. When he realized he was being filmed, he quickly dropped it. It seems apparent on the video that he did not want to be seen doing what he just did. So he pulled in a protester and started blaming him. So what are you doing breaking that window? The poor fellow that was being accused didn't know what was going on. And then he gave him a couple of really good shoves and cocked his arm like he was going to punch him. We don't know. His facial image is not on any of the Sedition Hunters sites or the FBI's most wanted site, but he clearly was committing criminal damage to property, and he has not been charged. So it raises a question of why.
Also, the individual trying to, again, opening the window up is even encouraging people to enter, I believe, as well.
Yes.
What's he saying?
Well, he said, why don't y'all open the rest of it up?
Why don't you guys open up? It seems like that's what the deal is. I mean, I'm like, what?
I actually even want to just point something else out, too. That guy right there, his back's turned to the camera, who was pulling the window out, who we theorize could be a bad actor, or now, of course, if you're a conspiracy theorist, you might even say might have been one of those FBI agents in plain clothing. We can't know for sure. If I'm not mistaken, that is what's called a camel pack, because I actually own one of those myself for the purpose of I was playing airsoft. And when you're expecting to be out for a long day full of action and intense movement, a camel pack holds a lot of water. That could be 1 to 2 gallons, maybe even 3, 4, or 5 gallons. It can hold a lot of water, and you can see the little tube running up the back and over to the front. You can literally drink the water. And so, that's like military gear almost. It's available for public purchase, of course, but you don't see too many of what look like normal citizens in the crowd wearing those. That's very military-esque to be wearing that. Things that make you go, that's the whole point of this. Where this developing story will go, I don't know, but I'll be paying very close attention to it because I just can't get over that. 275 FBI agents in the crowd in plain clothing. Why? That's the question. Why were they there? Hopefully, Director of the FBI, Kash Patel, can give us some closure on that and investigate why they were there and give us some actual answers into what happened that day. And the final thing that the FBI did that they're not actually getting, weirdly enough, any credit for, but they turned in their own guy, James Comey. That's important to point that out. The law enforcement typically has a history of sticking together. And James Comey was one of the FBI's own. He was the former director of the FBI, and he did insidious work for the Democrat Party. We all know it. Now he's officially been indicted. And of course, the liberal media is shocked about this.
Virginia has heard the evidence, and at least a majority of those grand jurors have found that there is at least probable cause. So that's not enough to sustain a conviction, but that is enough to issue the indictment, and that's where we are right now.
What do you make of the charges, the false statements and the obstruction of justice? Do you expect that the false statements are allegations that he did not testify truthfully before Congress?
Based on the reporting, that would be my expectation. What I'm really interested to see is the obstruction just the false statements sort of characterized in another way, or is the obstruction something different? So in other words, you can charge someone as a prosecutor with false statements, and then you can pile on an obstruction charge, basically on the theory that by testifying falsely, you impeded an investigation, you obstructed justice. So I want to see, are they essentially redundant, or is there something different to the obstruction? I don't want to speculate, but there's all sorts of other conduct beyond false statements that could satisfy an obstruction charge. So that's one of the things I'm going to be looking for as soon as we get this indictment in hand.
Now, I waited to cover this story of James Comey being indicted. I knew it was coming. I could have covered the story even before it happened because I have great sources that were basically alerting me to the fact that it was going to happen, and I knew it. I just wanted to wait because there's a lot of details that go into something like this happening. There's a lot of moments that occur that are more worth reporting on after they happen rather than before, where you only have speculation to go off of. And I also had a couple of questions of my own. Mainly, what took so long? I originally even told myself that if Trump's Department of Justice didn't make prominent arrests by the end of August, that I was going to be outraged. And truthfully, I was. August came and went with basically crickets. September has basically come and went with basically crickets up until now. And it turns out this face right here was one of the main holdups. This is Eric Siebert. And you can see here, earlier this month, Eric Siebert, the U.S. attorney leading the probe into James Comey, abruptly resigned just hours after Trump called for him to be removed. Why did this happen? Siebert had reportedly told Trump's DOJ that there wasn't enough evidence to charge James Comey and also raised concerns about a potential case against him. Trump has long viewed Comey as a political enemy. Trump disputed Siebert's resignation, insisting late that night on Truth Social that he didn't quit. Instead, I fired him. All of this happened while his own Department of Justice appointees and key Republicans argued to keep the veteran prosecutor, to keep Siebert around. Now you can see here from this page, Real Political Data. This is more information I found being reported on by this page about Eric Siebert. He states, the Eric Siebert saga proves why the biggest issue with the Trump administration is Pam Bondi. Eric Siebert was purposefully waiting out the statute of limitations so he couldn't charge people like Comey. He was also referring to act against people like Bolton. Also, Pam Bondi viciously defended him, claiming he was doing the best he can and all of that nonsense. Trump forced Eric Siebert out. Suddenly, Comey, Letitia James, John Bolton, and others are about to be charged. Funny how that works. Yes, it is very funny how that works. And you want to know something else about this Eric Siebert guy? The plot thickens even more than just Pam Bondi defending him, even more than just assuming that he was waiting out the deadline for the statute of limitations so that they couldn't indict Comey. Because here's more information that I found about Eric Siebert right here.
So the U.S. attorney who was fired by Donald Trump in the Eastern District of Virginia, Eric Siebert, prepared a 51-page memo arguing that former FBI Director James Comey should not be indicted for lying to Congress under oath. What he didn't include in his memo is the fact that Siebert has a stunning conflict of interest. You see, his father-in-law, the father of his wife, is the godfather to James Comey's daughter. You can't make this stuff up.
As time continues to go on, when it comes to the Department of Justice and the FBI, you come to find that it seems like there's like a crime family that had infiltrated our justice system. James Comey's daughter was involved in the Department of Justice. She resigned back in July. Now this with Eric Siebert. And I'm going to cover another person in Comey's family in just a couple minutes here who also is having a problem with all this, who also works in the Department of Justice. It's absolutely crazy, and it explains so perfectly why justice on behalf of the American people has not been served correctly for the better half of a decade or more. And you know, the whole thing is, this was my biggest gripe with President Trump in his first term. He was too soft on political corruption, crimes, and pursuing justice. And he paid for it when he was voted out in 2020 and then relentlessly persecuted by his own political rivals from 2021 all the way through 2023. We saw that. They didn't show him any mercy. And that typical, soft, old-school conservative fear of playing with a gentle hand and throwing softballs rather than hardballs, so that way, when you're not in power and the Democrats are, they'll go easy on you too, that whole theory was shattered when we saw them viciously pursue not only the former president of the United States, who stood for the people, President Trump, but also pursued members of his cabinet and of his Department of Justice, etc., relentlessly, throwing some of them in jail. They showed no mercy. And of course, now that the tables are turned and Trump learned his lesson, now they want to cry and scream about it. But the problem remains the same, in all honesty, and very unfortunately. Now Trump is out for justice. He does want that. But unfortunately, in my opinion, I think he's appointed, once again, wrong people. He's working overall with definitely a much better cabinet. I like people like Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth, J.D. Vance, etc. But Pam Bondi, she's a no. And I have not liked her from the beginning. I've been vocal about her on this channel since probably around March or April, back when I created this channel. I just never liked her. And I'm being proven more and more correct on that stance as time goes on. I could tell she was soft. And the best case scenario for someone like Pam Bondi is that she is lazy and incompetent. And the worst case scenario is not even something I want to say at this point in time. To replace Eric Siebert, you can see in this photo here, in the middle, standing next to Pam Bondi, Lindsay Halligan was sworn in as the interim U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, and within 3 days of this change happening, like the other posts were stating, Comey was indicted. I wonder why that happened. Why was Pam Bondi so viciously defending Eric Siebert? Why did months and months go by with no major arrests, no major indictments, Comey's statute of limitations for this indictment nearly passing us by, all under Pam Bondi's watch? Why did that happen? You can see here summarized well in this tweet. Pam Bondi had 10 months to indict Democrat criminals for targeting Trump. Bondi's record, 0 indictments and 0 arrests. Lindsay Halligan had 3 days in the job, and she's indicting disgraced FBI Director James Comey. Bondi is the problem. And, you know, to even enhance that narrative right there, President Donald Trump did put out a very telling True Social post after Comey was indicted, where he states, "I'd like to thank Kash Patel and the outstanding members of the FBI for their brilliant work on the recent indictment of the worst FBI director in history of our country, James Dirty Cop Comey. He's a dirty one. The level of enthusiasm by the FBI was incredible, but only caused by the fact that they knew Comey for what he is and was, a total slimeball." Again, thank you to the FBI and specifically those that worked on this case with U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan and the DOJ. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Make America great again. President DJT. Do you notice who he didn't thank there? He mentioned Kash Patel by name and Lindsay Halligan, the newly appointed U.S. Attorney in Virginia. He did not mention Attorney General Pam Bondi. And there's been other tweets now in the past, I didn't report on them, where he called her out directly and called for the arrests pretty much straight up of people like Comey and Letitia James and others. I have a theory right now that Pam Bondi is actually finally on thin ice when it comes to where she stands with President Trump. He might finally be seeing her as an actual issue. And he might actually realize this term that he can no longer afford to take that soft stance position when it comes to pursuing justice against the corruption of the Democrat Party. And watching what Pam Bondi has done, which is basically associate herself with the FBI and tout off 4,000 plus arrests. That's great. That's expected, though. Every FBI and Department of Justice does that throughout every president's term. They arrest thousands of people, criminals, violent criminals, murderers, drug dealers, etc. It's great to see those numbers, but it's expected. It's not some sort of incredible accomplishment that the American people were really hoping for out of Pam Bondi. We expect those numbers. We want the big names. We know that there's a problem. We know there's a swamp, as President Donald Trump would call it, in our government. And it's still there, mind you. It is still there, and it needs to be dealt with this term. These next 3.5 years, we need to drain that swamp for the safety and security of our nation. And if Pam Bondi is going to continue to be soft and incompetent, it's not going to get done. And all it takes is shining a light where you see the cockroaches, and they all tend to scatter. But the fear of doing that, the fear of the implications, the fear of the consequences that could come later on down the line is what prevents the conservatives from doing it. Look what happens, though. Lindsay Halligan appointed 3 days ago, like I said, Comey indicted. Look at the fallout from that happening. They weren't expecting this to happen. Look at, of course, MSNBC reporting on this like it's a bad thing, but take a listen to this report. The aftermath of Comey being indicted.
But they have shattered this norm, and many people who work in the Justice Department feel like they can no longer function there and are trying to leave. And same with the FBI. And they are worried about what comes next. They are worried about what they're leaving behind and who's doing those jobs now. But it's a very personal decision. They feel like there's no reason to stay, because if you stand up and try to fight against these things that are happening, you're going to have your head chopped off anyway. You'll be fired unceremoniously. And so, yes, almost everyone I talk to who has the ability to leave is trying to leave.
So Comey gets indicted, and people within the Department of Justice, the FBI, whatever, they're leaving now in protest. Good. Like I said, you shine the flashlight and all the cockroaches scatter. They're leaving. This is literally called draining the swamp. And all it took was for some people, not Bondi, to have the courage to act. Trump, combined with Kash Patel and Lindsay Halligan. They stepped up, they acted. They defied the fear and the precedent being set within their own departments about how this can't be done. You can't indict Comey. There's not enough there. They defied that. And look what's happening. The trash is now taking itself out. That is why it's important for conservatives to be doing this and to be pursuing this tenfold. Don't just stop with Comey. And I know this is to get the ball rolling. Trump has even stated as much. Comey was on the mid-tier when it comes to his offenses. There are much bigger names with higher offenses, and I think they're using Comey to build momentum towards that. I hope that's what they're doing, at least. And as they do that, more and more filth will purge itself from our systems. More and more cockroaches will crawl away desperately from the shining light of impending justice. And remember what I said about how there seems to be a crime family within these institutions? Well, guess who was one of the big ones to resign after Comey was indicted? Troy A. Edwards Jr., Deputy Chief, National Security Section, U.S. Attorney's Office, EDVA, addressed September 25th, 2025 to Lindsay Halligan, United States Attorney, U.S. Attorney's Office. Dear Miss Halligan, to uphold my oath to the Constitution and country, I hereby resign as an Assistant United States Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia in the Department of Justice, effective immediately. Now, who's this resignation letter from? Well, that is from James Comey's son-in-law, who was a January 6th prosecutor, mind you. Isn't that interesting? Comey had his daughter involved, his son-in-law involved. We have the reports on that other guy who was holding up everybody. Pam Bondi was vouching for him for some reason. Turns out he has connections with the Comey family. They're all gone now. Maybe now that they're all gone, justice can finally prevail. That is, of course, if Pam Bondi is willing to allow it to prevail. You see, this meme might unfortunately be all too true. And for some reason, President Donald Trump has decided to have her back thus far. And though some of his more recent social media posts suggest that there might finally be some internal struggles happening there, some doubts on his end about her competency, him not even giving her credit for Comey's indictment because she truthfully doesn't deserve it, you know, I'm afraid she's named quite appropriately compared to the cooking spray there, Pam. Nothing sticks when you use Pam. We'll see what happens, though. The pressure's on once again. And she's been nothing but a letdown to the American public so far with the Epstein file debacle, talking about how hate speech should be prosecuted. Everything she has done has been a disaster to the image of the Trump administration and a disaster when it comes to public relations, because even Trump's own supporters don't like her. But if there's anybody who deserves this justice coming his way, it is certainly James Comey. And I'll tell you right now, be sure to subscribe to American Advocates for more reporting and content like this, unless, of course, you think James Comey is an American hero and you pray for him to beat this while listening to Bruce Springsteen and worshiping your Obama poster in your room. If that's you, oh my God, please dislike this video and get off this channel. This channel is not for you. This channel is for American patriots who want justice and want America to be safe and secure going forward. I'll leave you guys with Stephen Miller, the man that Gavin Newsom continues to call fascist. His thoughts on James Comey. Stephen Miller is a savage. I know you'll enjoy it. Thanks so much for watching. Give this video a like and comment down below.
It truly is one of the most heinous things that has ever happened in the history of our country, what James Comey did to our democracy. I can't think of anybody in modern history who has done more to sabotage and attack our constitutional republic than James Comey, beginning with the Russia hoax in 2016, as you said, the dirty dossier. James Comey, as the head of the FBI, tried to lay a trap to remove a duly elected president from office, to imprison and incarcerate his political allies and friends, and to lead an actual coup against the laws and Constitution of the United States. What James Comey did is truly one of the most severe assaults on our freedoms and liberties that has occurred in the whole history of this nation.